Hey folks, I'm Chris and I'm your Commander Mechanic. We're getting reveals of all of the new Commander pre-constructed decks from Streets of New Capenna this week, which means it's upgrade time. If you want to pick up any of these precons or even just order the singles of the exclusive cards within them, be sure to check out my affiliate Hairy Tarantula. Use my promo code CMDR5 for 5% off your first order and CMDR Mechanic to help support the channel. Today we're looking at the new Bedecked Brokers Precon. This white, green, and blue deck is all about counters on creatures, not just boring +1/+1 counters, but shield counters, ability counters, and more. It's also got some spicy political aspects you can lean into as well, which is incredible. I am a big fan. Speaking of, if you're a fan of the channel, please be sure to subscribe. Every new subscriber and viewer helps, so be sure to hit that button for more precon updates, deck techs, and wild brews each week. Bedecked Brokers is led by Perry the Pulverizer, not a platypus, which is a 3/3 Rhino Soldier for 4 mana. When he enters the battlefield, you put a shield counter on a creature you control. Shield counters are removed to prevent damage dealt to the creature with the counter on it, or to prevent it from being destroyed. It's like Indestructible Jr. Additionally, when Perry attacks, target creature you control gets trample and +1/+1 until end of turn for each different kind of counter on permanents you control. Not just counters on creatures, but counters on all permanents. I really like Perry. So much so, in fact, I did an early brew with this beefcake, linked up top, all about going wide with counters and making non-creature permanents into bulky creatures with Luxior. So I wanted to concentrate today on the in-the-box legend, Kros, Defense Contractor. Kros is a 4 mana 2/4 cat advisor, already great, who says at the beginning of your upkeep, put a shield counter on target creature an opponent controls. Whenever you put one or more counters on a creature you don't control, tap that creature and goad it. It gains trample until your next turn. This is an incredible political tool, bargaining with players to help them out and forcing them to attack opponents. If we find some ways to go wide with putting counters on creatures we don't control, we could be tapping down the entire board and forcing mayhem. I love this kind of strategy and it seems very let's make a deal, but of course we'll want to take the most advantage out of the situation. Let's see how we can do that. But the deck comes with a few new exclusive cards as well. In my opinion, some of the best of all of the Commander Precons, and I really do want to take a look at them. Some of these are incredible, versatile additions to the format that will be at home in a lot of decks. First up is Angelic Sleuth, a 3 mana 2/3 Flying Angel Advisor in mono white that helps investigate whenever another permanent with counters on it leaves the battlefield. Now, while it's card draw with extra steps, this is the kind of card draw white should be getting and expecting. I like investigating and making a volume of clue tokens. It's useful. Tap them for mana, sacrifice them for other benefits, anything. And the way that this is worded with leaves the battlefield means if you blink something with counters on it, you investigate too. I think this is great board wipe recovery and incidental value if you've got stuff with counters on it. A great step in the right direction for white. Speaking of the right direction for white, let's talk about Resourceful Defense. This amazing 3 mana enchantment is basically an Ozolith. Using the same wording of leaves the battlefield, you get to immediately shift those counters onto something else. No banking them and waiting until your combat step to move them around. This does mean that the counters don't pile up on Resourceful Defense itself, but you could safeguard them by putting them on it if you wanted to. You can move those counters to any permanent you control. That means you could stack them up on a land if you wanted to, just to put them somewhere. And for 5 mana you can, whenever you want, activate it to move any number of counters from one permanent to another. This is utility, and it is amazing. I love this effect and I can see it going in a whole bunch of decks. Grab it if you can. Now, another unique card in this precon I really like is Agent's Toolkit, a 3 mana green and blue artifact clue. It enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter, a flying counter, a death touch counter, and a shield counter on it. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may move a single counter from the toolkit onto that creature. And of course, being a clue, you can pay 2 mana and sacrifice it to draw a card. While I was brewing my Perry the Pulverizer deck last week, I was looking for a reliable way to get all of these kinds of counters, and here it is on a single card. This helps customize your creatures, give them abilities they wouldn't normally have, and help protect them, like giving a commander a shield counter. I love the utility. With the icing on the cake being once it's drained of counters, it sacrifices itself to draw a card and so that you can potentially recur it. It's beautiful. This one may be one of my new favorite utility cards. And lastly, we have Broker's Confluence, which lets us choose 3 of the following options, including choosing the same one multiple times. Proliferate, target creature phases out, or counter an activated or triggered ability. At 5 mana, it's a little much, but it is an instant, allowing us to bulk up our board by proliferating a bunch of times, or save creatures by phasing them out, or even protect us from a big swing by phasing out opponents' attackers. And countering an activated or triggered ability is a very useful tool if you're looking at possibly losing to non-combat damage. I like this a lot, though the 5 mana price tag makes me think twice about its inclusion in every Bant list I make. With these new cards out of the way, let's take a look at the list. You can find the existing list and my updated list in the link in the description below by following the links to my sponsor, Moxfield. Moxfield is the best deck building platform available, and as someone who is brewing upgrades to all 5 of the new Capenna Precons, they make it easier than ever. Bulk edit, changing print versions, and sorting by price makes it so that I can stay within budget and get you these guides as soon as possible. Be sure to check out my Moxfield profile link in the description below for more information. The existing Bedecked Brokers list is really good straight out of the box, a creature-heavy offering that plays into Parry the Pulverizer's strengths of diversifying types of counters. Of course, we have shield counter enablers like on Parry himself, easy enough, and +1/+1 counters with one of my favorites, Rishkar Pima Renegade. Not only do you get counters on creatures, you turn anything with a counter on it of any type into a mana dork. And then we have ability counters like on Crystalline Giant, a fantastic way to get almost all of the ability counters into play eventually. I really like the inclusion of Slippery Bog Bonder here too. Getting a hexproof counter into play to move around and play with is very, very helpful in a lot of situations, especially given the tools to bank it and put it on other creatures. But then we go off the rails. We get Hour counters from Midnight Clock, Brick counters from Oracle's Vault, and Hoofprint counters from Hoofprints of the Stag. While this is fine and good for Parry, we want to pivot to using Kros, Defense Contractor, as a commander so we don't exactly have to jump through these hoops to include counter diversity. While we will want to keep the theme of counters on our creatures intact, that is just baseline good, we will cut out the weird stuff for different weird stuff. For instance, new cards like Damning Verdict are great if we're going with Parry's strategy, counters on our creatures and our creatures only. But if we're going with Kros, then we want counters on opponent stuff as well, and that means our board wipe won't destroy those creatures. However, cards with support like Together Forever are very helpful. Support lets us put counters on other players' creatures to get that benefit from our commander, or we can put them on our own creatures if Kros isn't out yet. Same with Skyboon Evangelist. 5 mana might seem like a lot, but in combination with our commander, we can tap and goad 6 creatures at once. This paves the way for you to attack opponents and have them attack each other, and you get to sit back and just laugh. Cutting some of the less efficient means of counter generation on our own creatures, basically anything that doesn't enter with counters, would be my first steps. Avenging Huntbonder is cool and introduces the rare Double Strike counter, but in our game plan and at 5 mana, it's just too much for too little of an effect. Janara, Assurer of War, is another efficient flyer, but paying to put counters on her and only her isn't the effect that we're going for in this build. We can also cut some of the -1/-1 counter generators from the list. Wickerbough Elder, Wall of Roots, and Devoted Druid can go unless we're doing an infinite mana strategy with any of those. They're not really necessary and not the direction we want to take the deck in. What we'll want to be doing instead is putting counters on opponents' creatures, of course. And the #1 must-have include for this strategy is Generous Patron. This green 1/4 immediately supports 2, putting a +1/+1 counter on up to 2 other target creatures, ours or our opponents. Generous Patron has the added upside of drawing us a card whenever we put a counter on a creature we don't control. With just the Patron and Kros, we can be drawing an extra card every turn, goading extra creatures, and generating insane value while our opponents are forced to be at each other's throats. Nil's Discipline Enforcer is perfect as well, since in combination with our commander, he goads a creature from each player and ensures that once they aren't goaded, they're expensive to attack you with. This gets a little pillow 40, which is okay since we're beefing up our opponent's creatures and we may want to lean into that strategy further. It's an excellent way to be political and to get that synergy from our commander's strengths. Evolutionary Escalation and Sheltering Agent are both ways to make opponents' creatures big each turn while dissuading them from attacking you by making your creatures equally as big. The goal here is to be defensive, as Kros is a defense contractor, so let's let opponents be at each other's throats. The Graft mechanic, as seen on Plaxcaster Frogling or Simic Initiate, is an interesting synergy piece here. Since Kros only goads creatures until our next turn, if we put a counter on a creature an opponent controls on an opponent's turn, the only real effect we'll get is tapping it. I don't know if I'm a big fan of its use here, but it's an option for certain. But what I do really like is that Kros doesn't care what kind of counter we're putting on opponents' creatures, meaning a -1/-1 counter from a Contagion Clasp or Contagion Engine works too. Shrinking opponents' creatures, then sending them at each other is excellent utility. Retreat to Kazandu is another way to maximize our goading options, putting a +1/+1 counter on opponents' creatures when a land enters the battlefield under our control. Same can be said for Ajani, Adversary of Tyrants. His +1 ability puts a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures, not necessarily our own. Being able to tap and goad 2 creatures each turn is a great way to help protect ourselves. And lastly, of course, I need to comment on the mana base. Again, a few missed opportunities here to reprint some staple cards like Painlands. Outercar Waste would have loved to have been in this deck, but including good reprints like they have with Flooded Grove, Gavany Township, and Karn's Bastion are all very, very welcomed. I would recommend removing the Vivid lands in favor of basic lands. Yes, this is a 3-color deck, but there's no need to run subpar enters tapped lands. With Perry leading the deck, sure, these counters could help his counts, but with Kros at the helm, go with basics. You can find my full upgraded list linked in the description below. We've shuffled around some cards, changed the direction of the deck, and resulted in a defensive deck using political tools to not be threatening until we swoop in for the win. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Is this viable in your playgroup? What would you add or change? Is there anything that you would consider must-have for building around Kros? I would love to hear it. And, of course, good luck and have fun.